Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today's tutorial is on how to draft this beautiful pencil gown with a front slit. So because of the slit in front, I have an allowance of 1.5 inches, and because of the neckline, I have an allowance of 3 inches before the starting line. The length of my gown is 44 inches. I added 1 inch as my hemming allowance. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw out my basic lines. I'm going to draw out my shoulder to chest line, my shoulder to bust line, my shoulder to waistline, and my shoulder to hip line. So guys, on the starting line, I'm going to divide my shoulder measurement divided by 2, which is 15 inches, and 15 inches divided by 2 is 7.5 inches. And I'll be using a sleeve for this pattern, but because I'm using a stretchy fabric, I did not add 1/2 inch for the sleeve allowance. I just used the 7.5 inches. So here is my fabric, and it's a stretchy fabric. But before I go ahead to mark out my body circumference divided by 4 on my pattern, I need to know the stretch percentage I have on this particular fabric, and by doing so I'll be cutting a square with on this fabric. I'll be cutting 5 inches on one side and 5 inches on the other side, just to get the perfect square. So guys, to calculate the stretch percentage you have on any fabric, after cutting out your little piece of fabric, which is 5 by 5 inches, if it increases by 1 inch after stretching, know that you have 20% stretch. If it increases by 2 inches, it means you have 40% stretch. If it increases by 3 inches, it means you have 60% stretch. And if it increases by 4 inches, it means you have 80% stretch. If it increases by 5 inches, know that you have 100% stretch. So guys, after cutting out this piece of fabric from my main fabric, which is 5 inches by 5 inches, I'm just going to place my measuring tape on it and just stretch the fabric towards the higher numbers. So as you can see, this fabric stretches to 7 inches. It stretches as far as 7 inches. Now the basic I have is 5 inches. Initially I cut out 5 inches, which means I have additional 2 inches, and that 2 inches means I have 40% stretch. So guys, over here I have a different fabric which I cut out 5 inches long, and the width did not make up to 5 inches. So I just did the same thing I did for the previous fabric. I had to stretch it out, and you can see that it stretches up to 9 inches, which means I have additional 4 inches on this particular fabric, which means my stretch percentage is 80% because of the 4 inches increase. So for that particular fabric, I have 80% as my stretch percentage. But for the fabric I'm using for this tutorial, I have just 2 inches increase, which is 40% as my stretch percentage. So I'm so sorry guys, it was at this point I realized that my phone was not recording, but I'm still going to go ahead and explain what I did here. So guys, after finding out my stretch percentage, which is 2 inches increase from the basic 5 by 5 inches I cut out, for the bust circumference I had to minus 2 inches from my bust circumference. My bust circumference is 38 inches, and 38 inches minus 2 inches is 36 inches, and 36 inches divided by 4 is 9 inches. I also did the same thing for my waist circumference, which is 32 inches. 32 inches minus 2 is 30 inches, and 30 inches divided by 4 is 7.5 inches. So if you want to add that to the waistline, you will just add 1 inch as your dart allowance. And for the hip circumference, I have 42 inches. 42 inches minus 2 inches, which is my stretch percentage. My 40% stretch percentage is 40 inches, and 40 inches divided by 4 is 10 inches. Now whatever I have on my hip line, I'm just going to minus 2 inches from that and mark at the end of my gown. So for the neck width, I marked 3 inches as my neck width and went down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant, and also made my armhole curve. So guys, the neckline on this dress is a little above the shoulder line, so I came up by 1 inch. As you can see, I just made a square by 1 inch, went inwards by half of an inch, and then used my French curve to connect it to the shoulder slant, just like this, because the neckline is a little higher, or is a little above the shoulder line. The neckline is a little above the shoulder line, so you're just going to do this for the neckline. And for the design on the neckline, where you have your neck width, at that point where you have your neck width, you go down by 4 inches. You just make sure you draw a straight line and go down by 4 inches. And on the side where you have your back armhole, you mark 4 inches. So you mark 4 inches on both sides, and it will start from that your starting line, 4 inches. Just make a square from your starting line, 4 inches by 4 inches. And from that back and from the front armhole, mark 2.5 inches. From the front armhole, mark 2.5 inches. And then connect it to the new neck width you have, and connect it to your chest line like this. So this will give you the neckline for this pattern. Now for the back armhole, this will be your back armhole here, and the front armhole this will be your front armhole. Front armhole, and this is the back armhole. So when you're cutting, make sure you know exactly where you're cutting out. For the back neck depth, on this 1 inch I marked earlier on, I'm just going to go down by half of an inch and connect it to my new neck width. So this is my neck depth for the back inches. And I'm cutting out my back pattern. I'm just going to fold in this allowance I have here, because I will be adding my zipper to the front pattern instead of the back. So my back pattern will be on fold. I'll be cutting my back pattern on fold. If you want to add zipper to your back pattern, then you can go ahead and add your zipper allowance to your back pattern. But since I have allowance at the front already, I'm just going to add my zipper to the front pattern and then cut my back pattern on fold. So I'm just cutting out the back pattern first because I'll use this pattern to cut out my back pattern before I open it up to cut out the front pattern on my fabric. So I'm cutting out the back pattern first. So guys, I actually forgot to say this. Adding that to your waistline is totally optional. I did mine because I want to have a snatched look around the waistline. I'm already working with a stretchy fabric, so you can as well cut your pattern without adding your 1-inch dart intake. But I just want my dress to really look snatched at the waistline. That's why I went ahead to add 1 inch as my dart intake. I added 1 inch to the waistline for my dart intake because I'll be sewing a dart on my gown. So guys, I'm done cutting out my pattern on my fabric, and as you can see, I added 1 inch at the side, and also I added 1/2 inch to the neckline and the shoulder line. I already added 1 inch while drafting at the end of this gown, so I did not add any allowance at the end. So this is my back pattern. As you can see, it's on fold. I'm just going to take out the pins I have on it. I'm going to cut out the back armhole on my pattern. I'm cutting out the back armhole. So here I have my front armhole, and I'm cutting out this part here so as to get my front neckline. Open up the allowance you have before cutting it out completely. Now this is what I have. This is my front pattern, and I'm going to place this pattern on my fabric and cut out my front pattern with this. So guys, this is my front pattern, and as you can see, I added 1 inch to the side. I added 1/2 inch to the shoulder and also to the neckline. I added 1 inch as my sewing allowance at the side. Also know that because of the slit allowance, you will have 2 pieces as your front pattern, and your back pattern you will have just 1 piece. Thank you so much for watching guys. Please don't forget to subscribe, and see you in my next video.